Welcome world to the world of African biographies. On this channel, we discuss, get to know, and learn more about African legends, experts in sport, icons in music, scholars, and sportsmen. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share. Now let's get to know today's legend. Now today we're not talking about anyone who's a stranger to us. We're talking about the one and only Mr. President Thabo Mbeki. Now, last week I did a biography on his father. Actually, I think it was this week, Ogavan Mbeki. And I loved getting to know his father because, Thabo Mbeki is such an interesting figure. And I wanted to know like where he came from, who birthed him, and I see some similarities between him and his father. And I see that actually he's sort of a mirror of his own father, to be honest. And I love that. Now we're going to start with my favorite speech of all time from him. It's called I Am an African. I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the rivers, the deserts and the oceans of Africa. I am formed by the millions of people, black and white, who lived and died on this continent, who built and fought and sang and laughed and cried on this soil. I am the child of the African people, the product of the African experience. I am the heir to the struggles and the triumphs of the African people. I am an African. I am born of the struggles of the African people, the struggles against colonialism, against apartheid, against oppression. I am born of the victories of the African people, the victories over colonialism, over apartheid, over oppression. I am an African. I am the product of the African Renaissance, the rebirth of Africa, the resurgence of the African spirit. I am the future of Africa, the Africa that is to be, the Africa that we will build together. I am an African, I am an African, and I am an African. This is Thabo Mbeki, 1996. I feel like this was one of his like powerful speeches. I watched this speech over and over and over. Now let's get to the things that he liked as a person. When it comes to his style, Thabo Mbeki's style is pretty iconic. He's known for his sharp, sophisticated look, from tailored suits, often in dark colors like the navy or charcoal, crisp white t-shirts, ties with subtle patterns, pocket squares, adding a pop of color. So he's a very like intellectual man. He looks very, very serious. I used to think that actually Thabo Mbeki was so serious that he couldn't laugh in public, like he couldn't dance, he couldn't speak his native tongue to his people. But lo and behold, I was so wrong, because when I was diving deep doing this biography, I came across videos, because I thought that was like Zuma style of like when he goes in public, he's like Shenewam, Shenewam. Because yes, I did a biography on Jacob Zuma, and yes, he was like the choir director when he was in prison during the apartheid era, and he was playing soccer, so it made sense why Zuma would be the one like to start a song. But actually, even Thabo Mbeki, he's not really famous for being a good dancer. I've watched him dance, he's okay. He's all right. But he's very inclusive. I mean, during election time, he would go to the people, go to KwaZulu Natal and other provinces, dance with the people, go show up. I remember there was a tavern where even like a minister, a mayor, was killed, and other people, and he was there just to pay respect with his people. And the job of a bodyguard is very unfortunate, because it just means someone like is in great danger. But when it comes to his interest, he loves reading books, which is why I thought, oh my god, this is such a serious man. He's very intellectual, doesn't crack a joke. He enjoys history and politics and philosophy, hiking and nature, cricket, and he's a longtime fan, classical music. But Thabo Mbeki was eThekwini, and ebekhuluma efuna abantu bamvotele, which was nice, because I was told the opposite, which is why I love to deep dive to get to know these people, so that you can get to know them, for yourself. And singing with the people, dancing, and which is like very unfortunate, because people were like, That is so uncivilized. And obviously, it was more like of a European perspective. We don't see that as something that is uncivilized in South Africa or in Africa for leaders to dance or to sing with their people. Um, it's an inclusivity is to embrace the culture of the people and show that you are one with the people, because that's what people do. You know what I mean? You don't have to like speeches all the time and be diplomatic all the time. And I enjoy that side of him. So it's a bit of a sad thing that someone would think that is just embarrassing. I disagree with him. But let's get to know who Thabo Mbeki is. The son of Govan Mbeki, an ANC intellectual, Mbeki has been involved in ANC politics since 1956 when he joined the ANC Youth League, and has been a member of the ANC's National Executive Committee since 1975. Born in the Transkei, he left South Africa aged 20 to attend university in England and spent almost 3 decades in exile abroad until the ANC was unbanned in 1990. He rose through the organization in its information and publicity section and as Oliver Tambo's protege, but he was also an experienced diplomat, serving as the ANC's official representative in several of its African outposts. He was an early advocate for and leader of the diplomatic engagements which led to the negotiations to end apartheid. After South Africa's first democratic election in 1994, he was appointed National Deputy President. In subsequent years, it became apparent that he was Mandela's chosen successor, and he was elected unopposed as ANC President in 1997, enabling his rise to the presidency as the ANC's candidate in the 1999 election. He was saying in another interview that actually Madiba, when he was like the deputy, Madiba gave him like a huge role to oversee the economy, to run the country, while Madiba was busy like negotiating with other countries and being on the ground with the people. So in a way, he was like being prepared to be president because Madiba told him that he was gonna resign after the first term, and he did just that. So when he came to the seat of presidency, he was already like familiar with the work. While Deputy President Mbeki had been regarded as a steward of the government's growth, employment, and redistribution policy introduced in 1996, and as president, he continued to subscribe to relatively conservative, market-friendly macroeconomic policies. During his presidency, South Africa experienced falling public debt, a narrowing budget deficit, and consistent moderate economic growth. However, despite his retention of various social democratic programs and notable expansions to the Black Economic Empowerment Program, critics often regarded Mbeki's economic policies as neoliberal with insufficient consideration for development and redistributive objectives. On these grounds, Mbeki grew increasingly alienated from the left wing of the ANC and from the leaders of the ANC's tripartite alliance partners, the Congress of South African Trade Unions and South African Communist Party. It was these leftist elements which supported Jacob Zuma over Mbeki in the political rivalry that erupted after Mbeki's removed the latter from his post as deputy president in 2005. As President Mbeki had an apparent predilection for foreign policy and particularly for multilateralism, his Pan-Africanism and vision for an African renaissance are central part of his political persona, and commentators suggest that he secured for South Africa a role in African and global politics that was disproportionate to the country's size and historical influence. He was the central architect of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, and as the inaugural chairperson of the African Union, spearheaded the introduction of the African Peer Review Mechanism after the IBSA Dialogue Forum was launched in 2003. His government collaborated with India and Brazil to lobby for reforms at the United Nations, advocating for a stronger role for developing countries. Among South Africa's various peacekeeping commitments during his presidency, Mbeki was the primary mediator in the conflict between ZANU-PF and Zimbabwean opposition in the 2000s. However, he was frequently criticized for his policy of quiet diplomacy in Zimbabwe, under which he refused to condemn Robert Mugabe's regime and constitute sanctions against it. He was reluctant to make conflict with Zimbabwe because he realized that, okay, this is not like in South Africa where it was like the apartheid movement, and obviously the other African countries came to fight with us or with South Africa to end apartheid, where it was fire for fire. So he decided to take the diplomatic approach so that there will be no more deaths, because he anticipated that if he was harsh on Mugabe, then there are people who strongly supported Mugabe and who were willing to die for Mugabe. So if he took a harsher way of dealing with Mugabe than being diplomatic, that a war would arise and more people or innocent individuals would be unalived. And some Zimbabweans still criticize him for that, but I understand his approach. So he said Zimbabwe must not compare what happened to Zimbabwe, like the free, independent Zimbabwe. They must not compare it with the apartheid system in South Africa. Those are two different times. Also highly controversial worldwide was Mbeki's HIV and AIDS policy. His government did not introduce a national mother-to-child transmission prevention program until 2002, when it was mandated by the Constitutional Court, nor did it make antiretroviral therapy available in the public healthcare system until late 2003. Subsequent studies have estimated that these delays caused hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths. Mbeki himself, like his health minister, Mantu Chabalala Msimang, has been described as an AIDS denialist, dissident, or skeptic, although he did not explicitly deny the causal link between HIV and AIDS. He often posited a need to investigate alternate causes of the alternative treatment for AIDS, frequently suggesting that immune deficiency was the indirect result of poverty. Now, when it comes to the HIV controversy, Mbeki said that the cause of death when he was in power, HIV and AIDS was on number 9. Before the treatment was made public or was spread everywhere in South Africa, it was number 9. And he looked at what the acronym AIDS stands for. So in the acronym, there's obviously an immune deficiency, right? Yeah. So in the ID of AIDS, because it's AIDS, and he said immune deficiency is a result of poverty because people are not eating right. So he wanted to address that problem and not just run to give people pills without them having a proper diet. And he said that after treatment was all over South Africa, spread for everyone to actually get the treatment, now the death rate was number 3. So you do the judgment yourself. His political descent became at the ANC's Polokwane conference in December 2007, when he was replaced as ANC president by Zuma. Although his term as national president was not due to expire until June 2009, he announced on 20 September 2008 that he would resign at the request of the ANC National Executive Committee. The ANC decision to recall Mbeki was understood to be linked to a High Court judgment handed down earlier that month in which Judge Chris Nicholson had alleged improper political interference in the National Prosecuting Authority and specifically in the corruption charges against Zuma. Nicholson's judgment was overturned by the Supreme Court of Appeal in January 2009. Now let's go to his birth. Mbeki was born on the 18th June 1942 in Mbeuleni, a small village in the former homeland of Transkei, now part of the Eastern Cape. The second of four siblings, he had one sister, Linda, born 1941, died 2003, and two brothers, Moletsi, born 1949, and Jama, born 1948, died 1982. His parents were a Pianet, died 2014, a trained teacher, and Govan, died 2001, a shopkeeper, teacher, journalist, and senior activist in the African National Congress and the South African Communist Party. Both Epiniet and Govan came from educated Christian land-owning families, and Govan's father was Sikeleu Mbeki, a colonially appointed headman. The couple had met in Durban, where Epiniet and had become the second black woman to join the SACP, then still called the Communist Party of South Africa. However, while Mbeki was a child, his family was separated when Govan moved alone to Ladysmith for a teaching job. Mbeki has said that he was born into the struggle and recalls that his childhood home was decorated with portraits of Karl Marx and Mahatma Gandhi. Govan named him after senior South African communist Thabo Mofutshanyana. Mbeki began attending school in 1948, the same year that the National Party was elected with a mandate to legislate apartheid. The Bantu Education Act was implemented towards the end of his school career, and in 1955 he arrived at the Lovedale Institute, an eminent mission school outside Alice, as part of the last class, which would be permitted to follow the same curriculum as white students. At Lovedale, he was a year behind Krezani, his future colleague and rival in the ANC. Mbeki joined the ANC Youth League at the age of 14 and in 1958 became the secretary of its Lovedale branch. Shortly afterwards, at the start of his final year of high school, he was identified as one of the leaders of a March 1959 boycott of classes and was summarily expelled from Lovedale. He nonetheless sat for matric examination and obtained a second-class pass. In June 1960, Mbeki moved to Johannesburg, where he lived in the home of ANC Secretary General Duma Nokwe and where he intended to sit for an A-level examination. The ANC had recently been banned in the aftermath of the Sharpeville massacre, but Mbeki remained highly politically active, becoming National Secretary of the African Students Association, a new and short-lived youth movement envisaged as replacing the now illegal ANC Youth League. It was also during this period that Nokwe recruited Mbeki into the SACP. Thus, the ANC instructed him to join the growing cohort of cadres who were leaving South Africa to invade police attention, receive training, and establish the overt ANC structures that were now illegal inside the country. Mbeki was detained twice by the police while attempting to leave the country. First in Rustenburg, when the group he was traveling with failed to pass themselves off as a touring football team, and then in Rhodesia. How can you fail? How can you fail, brothers? He arrived at the ANC's new headquarters in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in November 1962 and left shortly afterwards for England. While at Success, Mbeki was involved in ANC work and in broader organizing for the English anti-apartheid movement. Months after his arrival, his father was arrested during a security branch raid at Lily's Leaf Farm in July 1963. During the ensuing Rivonia trial, Mbeki appeared before the United Nations Special Committee on Apartheid and later led a student march from Brighton to London, a distance of 50 miles. At the conclusion of the trial, Govan and seven other ANC leaders, among them Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu, were sentenced to life imprisonment. Mbeki completed his bachelor degree in economics in May 1965, but at the exhortation of O.R. Tambo, enrolled for a master's in economics and development instead of returning to Africa to join Umkhonto weSizwe and ANC's undoing. His master's dissertation was in economic geography. In addition to this and his political organizing, he developed a deep fondness for Yeats, Brecht, and Shakespeare and blues music. After completing his master's in October 1966, he moved to London to work full for the propaganda section of the ANC's English headquarters. In the absence of his parents, he was Adelaide and senior communist Michael Hummel, who attended Mbeki's graduation ceremony in 1965. O.R. Tambo later became the ANC's longest-serving president, and he acted as Mbeki's political mentor and patron until his death in 1993. Other friends Mbeki made in England, including Ronia Casriel and brothers Aesop Powhatan and Aziz Pahad were also among his key political allies in his later career. In February 1969, Mbeki was sent to Moscow in the Soviet Union to receive Marxist-Leninist political and ideological training, a fairly common practice and even a rite of passage among young people identified as belonging to the future generation of ANC and SACP political leaders. Between 1975 and 1976, Mbeki was instrumental in establishing the ANC's frontline base in Swaziland. He was first sent there to assess the political landscape in January 1975 under the cover of attending a UN conference as part of its reconnaissance trip. He and his colleague Max Sisulu spent time with Sibundebele, Max's sisters Lindiwe Sisulu, and their associates in the Black Consciousness movement, which at the time was ascendant in neighboring South Africa. Mbeki made a positive report to the ANC executive, and he was sent back to Swaziland to begin establishing the base in Swaziland. He lived at Stanley Mabizela's family's home in Manzini, working with Albert Ndlomo. Mbeki was also responsible for recruiting new MK operatives, for liaising with South African student and labor activists, and for liaising with Inkatha, which was becoming dominant in Natal. However, still another part of his duties was to act as the ANC's official representative in the country and to maintain good diplomatic relations with the Swazi government. In March 1976, the government discovered that Mbeki was involved in military activity inside Swaziland, and he and Lomo, as well as Zuma, who was in the country illegally, were detained and then deported, although they managed to negotiate their deportation to the neutral territory of Mozambique rather than to South Africa. Mbeki's management of the Swaziland base later became a point of contention between him and Mark Maharaj, with whom his relationship was remained acrimonious decades later. In 1978, Maharaj and Mbeki argued at the top-level strategic meeting in Luanda, Angola, when Maharaj, who had been tasked with running the political underground, claimed that Mbeki's records from the Swaziland office were in fact just an empty folder. After being deported, Mbeki returned to Lusaka, where he was made Duma Nokwe's deputy in the ANC's Department of Information and Propaganda. In January 1976, he was posted to Lagos, Nigeria, where he was to be, as in Swaziland, the ANC's first representative to the country, although there was some debate about whether the appointment was a signal that he had been sidelined. Gavaza says that Mbeki performed well in Lagos, establishing good relations with Olusegun Obasanjo's regime and establishing an ANC presence to eclipse that of its rival Pan-African Congress. When he returned to Lusaka from Lagos in 1978, he was promoted again. He replaced Nogwe as head of DIP and simultaneously was appointed Tambo's political secretary, an extremely influential position in which he became one of Tambo's closest advisors and confidants. He also continued to ghostwrite for Tambo, now in a normal capacity. At DIP, his approach was encapsulated by the change he made to the department's name, replacing propaganda with publicity. He assured the secretary of earlier years and openly gave interviews and access to American journalists to the disapproval of some hard line communists. According to various sources, he was responsible for reforming the public image of the ANC from that of a terrorist organization to that of a government in waiting. When I look at Tabo, I look at my husband's son. Physically, they bear a striking resemblance. They are both perfectionists, but without the intolerance that comes from many who share that quality. They are loyal and true. They are their own harshest critics. They both have the gift to draw people to them. They were soulmates, different generations focusing on that particular time. Adelaide Tambo reflects on Beke's relationship with Waral Tambo in a quote in June 2022. He established some of his own high-level intelligence networks with key underground operatives reporting directly to him, and Gavasa claims that these led to the initiation of relationships with many of the domestic activists who later became his political allies. However, he was responsible for innovating some of the vocabulary which became emblematic of the 1980s anti-apartheid struggle, which burgeoned. Mbeki negotiated an extraordinary congenial agreement between ZANU-PF and the ANC. The agreement allowed the ANC to open an office in Zimbabwe and to move MK weapons and cadres over Zimbabwe's borders. Moreover, it committed the Zimbabwean military to assisting the ANC and the government to providing MK cadres with Zimbabwe's identity documents. However, Mbeki handed the running of the Salisbury office over to another ANC official, and the deal later collapsed. In 1985, P.W. Botha declared a state of emergency and gave the army and police special powers. In 1986, the South African Army sent a captain in South African Defence Force to kill Mbeki. The plan was to put a bomb in his house in Lusaka, but the assassin was arrested by the Zambian police before he could go through the plan. Also in 1985, Mbeki became the ANC's director of the Department of Information and Publicity and coordinated diplomatic campaigns to involve more white South Africans in anti-apartheid activities. In 1989, he rose in the ranks to head the ANC's Department of International Affairs and was involved in the ANC's negotiation with the African government. Ours is a capitalist society. It is therefore inevitable that in part, and Olivia calls Mbeki the seminal thinker behind NEPAD and its principal author and articulator. According to academic Chris Landsberg, NEPAD's central principle, African leaders holding one of another accountable in exchange for the recommitment of the industrialized world of African development, epitomized Beke's strategy in Africa. Mbeki was also involved in the dissolution of the Organization of African Unity and its replacement by the African Union, of which he became the inaugural chairperson in 2002, and his government spearheaded the introduction of the AU's African Peer Review Mechanism in 2003. Vice chairperson of the South African Government Community, first from 1999 to 2000, and second. Quiet diplomacy in Zimbabwe. Mbeki's presidency coincided with an escalating political and economic crisis in South Africa's neighbor, Zimbabwe, under President Mugabe of ZANU-PF. Problems included land invasions under the fast track land reform programs, political violence, and state sponsored human rights violation and hyperinflation with SADC's endorsement. Mbeki frequently acted as a mediator between ZANU-PF and the Zimbabwean opposition. However, controversially, his policy toward the Mugabe regime was one of the non-confrontational, quiet diplomacy and constructive engagement. He refused to condemn Mugabe's and instant attempts to persuade him to accept gradual political reforms. He was firmly opposed to forcibly and manufactured regime change in Zimbabwe and also opposed the use of sanctions. The Economist posited an Mbeki doctrine holding that South Africa cannot impose its will on others, but it can help with instability in African countries by offering its resources and its leadership to bring rival groups together and to keep things calm until an election is safely had, Mbeki said in 2004. According to political scientist Jeffrey Herbst, Mbeki's HIV and AIDS policies were bizarre at best, severely negligent at worst. In 2000, amid a FIFA World Cup bid, as President Mbeki spearheaded South Africa's successful bid to host the 2010 FIFA World Cup, commentators and Mbeki himself frequently linked the bid to his vision for an African renaissance. 2015, amid the American investigation into corruption at FIFA soccer administrator Chuck Blazer testified that between 2004 and 2011, he and other FIFA executives had received bribes in connection with South Africa's bid. Mbeki denied any knowledge of the bribes. Now coming to the electricity crisis in South Africa. In late 2007, Mbeki's government announced that the public power utility Eskom would introduce electricity rationing or rolling blackouts, commonly known in South Africa as load shedding. In subsequent months, Mbeki publicly apologized, acknowledging that the government failed to heed Eskom's warnings, offered regularly for several consecutive years that infrastructure investment were required to avoid energy shortage. In his words, Eskom was right and government was wrong. However, some analysts suggested that insufficient investment was not the hindrance to electricity supply, and that other policy decisions by government and at Eskom, including the implementation of Black economic empowerment criteria in coal procurement contracts, had contributed to the crisis. In his last State of the Nation address in February 2008, Mbeki repeated the apology and devoted nearly 3 pages of his speech to government's plan for addressing the energy crisis. And the xenophobic attacks. In May 2008, a series of riots took place in a number of South African townships, mainly in Gauteng province, when South African residents violently attacked migrants from other African countries. At least 62 people were killed, several hundred injured, and many thousands displaced. To contain the violence, Mbeki deployed the army to affected areas, the first such deployment to a civilian area since the end of apartheid. In a televised address towards the end of the saga, Mbeki called the attacks an absolute disgrace, saying, "Never since the birth of our democracy have we witnessed such carelessness." Some comments argued that Mbeki's government had failed to acknowledge or sufficiently to address growing xenophobia in South Africa in the years preceding the attacks. Indeed, the AU's African peer review mechanism had reported in 2006 that xenophobia was an urgent concern in South Africa. These criticisms were often linked to criticism of Mbeki's policy in Zimbabwe, because a large proportion of South Africa's growing foreign-born population were Zimbabwean refugees. Moreover, when Mbeki argued that the attacks had other motives, both economic and criminal, some critics accused him of xenophobia, denialism, and of refusing to acknowledge the genuine xenophobic sentiment in parts of the population. Now, when it comes to his succession in the Polokwane Conference. In June 2005, Mbeki removed Zuma from his post as National Deputy President after Zuma's associate Chabir Chaika was convicted of making corrupt payments to Zuma in relation to the 1999 arms deal. The National Prosecuting Authority charged Zuma with corruption later that year. However, Zuma remained deputy president of the ANC, and in subsequent years, the rivalry between Zuma and Mbeki and their allies intensified, with Zuma supporters frequently alleging that the charges against Zuma were politically motivated. In 2007, Zuma had emerged as an apparent contender in the ANC presidential election to be held at the party's 52nd National Conference in Polokwane, Limpopo. By April of that year, it was also clear that Mbeki intended to stand for a third term as ANC president. Mbeki's term as a national president would expire in 2009, and he had said in 2006 that he had no intention of having the constitution changed to permit him a third term in office, saying, "By the end of 2009, I will have been in a senior position in government for 15 years. I think it's too long." However, the ANC lacked internal term limits, and some suspected that he intended to continue to exact substantial influence over the government through the ANC presidency. Zuma drew substantial support from the left wing of the party, especially through the ANC Youth League and the ANC's partners in the tripartite alliance, the South African Communist Party and COSATU, with both Mbeki's relationship was extremely poor. African Communist Party and COSATU, with whom Mbeki's relationship was extremely poor, at the elect conference on December 18th, Mbeki lost the presidential election to Zuma, gaining less than 40% of the vote. According to the ANC tradition, as ANC president, Zuma would become the party's presidential candidate in 2009 general election, and therefore, given the ANC's substantial electoral majority, was overwhelmingly likely to succeed Mbeki as national president in 2009. High Court findings and appeal. On 12 September 2008, Pietermaritzburg High Court Judge Chris Nicholson set aside the corruption charges against Zuma. He found that the charges were unlawful on the procedural grounds that the NPA had not given Zuma adequate opportunity to make representations. Nicholson also lent his support to allegations that Zuma's charges had been politically motivated, saying that he was not convinced that Zuma was incorrect when he averred political meddling in his prosecution, and that the case seemed to be part of a great political contest or game. Mbeki later applied to the Constitutional Court to appeal the judgment, calling Nicholas' findings about the political interference vexatious and scandalous and prejudicial, which comes with prejudice. The NPA also appealed. In January 2009, the Supreme Court of Appeal found in its favor and overturned Nicholson's ruling, partially redeeming Mbeki. The appellate court said that Nicholas' allegations of political interference had been irrelevant to Nicholas' decision and had apparently derived from Nicholson's own conspiracy theory. I was very young when Mbeki was removed from office. I didn't understand any of this thing. All I know that it was just sad. It was just sad. But in recent interviews, Malema, who was supporting Zuma at the time, will be like, "I will die for Zuma." Now he don't want to be friends with Zuma no more. He said they were lied to because the Youth League, Malema was part of it, and they were lied, and they were lied to. And right now, he seems to support Mbeki and get along with Mbeki, but they were the ones who were, responsible for removing, him. However, shortly after Nicholas delivered his judgment and months before the appeal was heard, the Zuma-aligned ANC National Executive Committee, as elected at the Polokwane Conference, recalled Mbeki asking him to resign as national president. The National Executive Committee is a party political body and therefore lacked the constitutional authority to remove Mbeki directly, but the ANC-controlled parliament could have affected his removal had he not acquiesced voluntarily. On 20th September 2008, a spokesman announced that Mbeki would resign. In court papers filed later that week, Mbeki said that it was not Nicolasson's findings which had led to my being recalled by my political party, the ANC, a request I have acceded to as a committed and loyal member of the ANC for the past 52 years. In the aftermath of his announcement, at least 11 cabinet ministers and 3 deputy ministers, including Deputy President Mlambo Ngcuka and Minister of Finance Trevor Manuel, announced that they would also resign. Mbeki's resignation took effect on the 25th September, and he was replaced as a national president by Kgale Motlale, who had been elected ANC deputy president at the Polokwane conference. That was short-lived, Motlale. After his resignation from the presidency, Mbeki retained his ANC membership but retreated from party politics. In the meantime, the Congress of the People, COPE, was founded as a breakaway party composed largely of former ANC members known to be the Mbeki loyalists. There were rumors that Mbeki was involved in COPE and would perhaps defect to it, especially after his mother, Apianet, widow of the ANC stalwart Govan, began attending COPE election rallies in the family's native Eastern Cape. According to political analyst Suzanne Boysan, although Mbeki would never emerge from the silent, invisible wings into center stage, the whole COPE plot carried the Mbeki stamp. Mbeki began again to appear at ANC events and to comment on ANC politics from around 2011. Although he had since said that he continued to vote for the ANC in the interim, he did not campaign on its behalf at any time during the Zuma presidency, which lasted between 2009 to 2018. In more recent years, he had been fairly vocal in reflecting publicity about perceived problems in the ANC and its leadership, about the country's economic problems and policies. Motlane asked Mbeki to remain in his role as mediator in Zimbabwe after his resignation in 2008, and he later returned to Zimbabwe in 2020 to mediate further political dispute. This is very important in how Thabo Mbeki is very diplomatic, because even people that were trying to help, South Africa during its suffering, they were asking for the African leaders to remove the president of Zimbabwe at that time, before Mnangagwa. And he said, well, who are you to remove the president of Zimbabwe? It must be up to the people. You must ask the people, like, what do they want? And I found that was very much like, I never really thought of that. Like, really? Like, you can't really say, like, as a South African, I can't really say they must remove the president of another country in Africa. It must be the people that decide that, the people of the country, because it is their country, what they want with their country. And the people of that country of Zimbabwe at that time, they never said anything about removing Mugabe. They tended to other needs. So I thought that was very matured. And he also continued to chair the long-serving AU High-Level Implementation Panel for Sudan and South Sudan, which in 2016 brokered an agreement between warring Sudanese parties to begin peace negotiations, although he remained critical of the UN's interventions in Africa. He also chaired the UN Economic Commissions for Africa's High-Level Panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, which was established in collaborations with the AU in 2011. The Thabo Mbeki Foundation was launched on the 10th October 2010 ahead of a 3-day conference. Its mission centers around Mbeki's trademark African Renaissance and the objective of promoting Africa's political, social, and the objective of promoting Africa's political, social, economic, and cultural development. It was launched in tandem with the Thabo Mbeki's African Leadership Institute, which aims to train leaders capable of contributing to the Mbeki. Mbeki has sometimes been characterized as a remote and academic, although in his second campaign for the presidency in 2004, many observers described him as finally relaxing into more traditional ways of campaigning, sometimes dancing at events, which I saw, and even kissing babies. You go, Tabo. Beki used his weekly column in the ANC's newsletter, ANC Today, to produce discussions on a variety of topics. He sometimes used his column to deliver pointed invective against political opponents, and at other times used it as a kind of professor of political theory, educating ANC cadres on the intellectual justification of African National Congress policy. Although these columns were remarkable for their dense prose, they often were used to influence news, although Mbeki did not generally make a point of befriending or quoting reporters. His column and news events often yielded good results for his administration by ensuring that his message in a primary driving force of news coverage. Indeed, in initiating his column, Mbeki stated his view that the bulk of South African media sources did not speak for or to the South African majority, and stated his intent to use ANC Today to speak directly to his constituents rather than through the media. Mbeki appeared to have been at ease with the internet and willing to quote from it. For instance, in a column discussing Hurricane Katrina, he cited Wikipedia, quoted a lengthy discussion of Katrina's lessons on America's inequality from the Native American publication Indian Country Today, and then included excerpts from the David Brooks column in the New York Times in a discussion of why the events of Katrina illustrated the necessity for global development and redistribution of wealth. Controversies. Amsdale, there have been rumors and allegations, never proven or prosecuted and denied by Mbeki, that Mbeki was involved in or aware of corruption in the 1999 Amsdale, a major defense procurement package negotiated while he was deputy president. Crime. In 2004, Thabo Mbeki made an attack on commentators who argued that violent crime was out of control in South Africa, calling them white racists who want the country to fail. He alleged that crime was falling and some journalists were distorting reality by depicting black people as barbaric savages who liked to rape and kill. Annual statistics published in September 2004 showed that most categories of crime were down, but some had challenged the figures' credibility and said that South Africa's remained extremely dangerous, especially for women. In a column for the African National Congress website, the president rebuked the doubters. Mbeki did not name journalist Charlene Smith, who had championed victims of sexual violence since writing about her own rape, but quoted a recent article in which she said South Africa had the highest rate of rape and referred, apparently sarcastically, to her as an internationally recognized expert on sexual violence. He said she was saying our culture, traditions, and religions as Africans inherently make every African man a potential rapist, view which defines the African people as barbaric savages. Mr. Mbeki also described the newspaper The Citizen and other commentators who challenged the apparent fall in crime as pessimists who did not trust black rule. In January 2007, the African Peer Review Mechanism draft report on South Africa was released. This noted that South Africa had the world's second highest murder rate, with about 50 people a day being killed, and that although serious crimes was reported as falling, security analysts said that the use of violence and robberies and rape were more common. Mbeki, in response, said in an interview that fears of crime were exaggerated. In December 2007, the final African Peer Review Mechanism report of South Africa again suggested that there was an unacceptably high level of violent crime in the country. President Mbeki said that the suggestion of unacceptably high violence appeared to be an acceptance by the panel of what he called populist view. He challenged some of the statistics on crime, which he noted may have resulted from a weak information base leading the wrong conclusion. Although rape statistics had been obtained from the South African Police Service, this only denotes the incidents of rape that were reported, some of which could have resulted in acquittals, Mbeki indicated. In 2004, the Archbishop Emeritus of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu, criticized President Mbeki for surrounding himself with yes men, not doing enough to improve the position of the poor, for promoting economic policies that only benefited a small black elite. He also accused Mbeki and the ANC of suppressing public debates. Mbeki responded that Tutu had never been an ANC member and defended the debates that took place with ANC branches and other public forums. He also asserted his belief in the value of democratic discussion by quoting the Chinese slogan, "Let 100 flowers bloom," referring to the brief 100 flowers campaign within the Chinese Communist Party in 1956 and 1957. The ANC Today newsletter featured several analyses of the debate written by Mbeki and the ANC. The letter suggested that Tutu was an icon of white elites, thereby suggesting that his political importance was overblown by the media. And while the article took pains to say that Tutu had not sought his status, it was described in the press as particularly pointed and personal critique of Tutu. Tutu responded that he would pray for Mbeki as he had prayed for the official of the apartheid government. You go, Tutu. What? On 10 October 2024, Mbeki wrote a letter to Mr. Matome Chilion, member of the executive for the Gauteng Educational Department, criticizing the GED's handling of the incident of alleged racism of Pretoria High School for girls. The letter was copied to the Gauteng Premier, Mr. Panyaza Lesufi. The GED had been criticized in the South African media for claiming that there was racism at Pretoria High School for girls without a proof of such. In October 59, Mbeki had a son, Monwabisi Kwanda, with Olive Mpahlwa, a childhood friend whom he had struck up a romance while at Lovedale. Kwanda was raised by his mother and later by Mbeki's mother, Epianet. He was last seen by his family in 1981 and presumed to have died in exile, but the circumstances of his death remained unknown. Olive testified about his disappearance at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1996, marking an impassioned plea for those with information to step forward. Mbeki's youngest brother, Jama, also disappeared in exile. He had spent his adolescence in Lesotho and was an activist in the Basotholand Congress Party and its Lesotho Liberation Army. BCP was much closer in the PAC than to the ANC and later became a avowed enemy of the latter. Jama disappeared in March 1982 after he skipped bail, according to an investigation commissioned by his family, and in the early 1990s he was informed upon a comrade entrapped by security police and killed on the side of highway. Later in 1982, Mbeki's only sibling, Maulitsi, was also educated abroad and is now a prominent economist. He often publicly criticized the policies of his brother's government. Woo! All right. Mbeki married Zanele Dlamini Mbeki in 1974, a social worker from Alexandra whom he met in London before his departure to Moscow. The wedding ceremony was held on 23 November at Friham Castle in Surrey, England. Adelaide Tambo and Mendi Msimang stood in local parentage for Mbeki, and Aesop Pahad was his best man. They have no children together. I find it interesting that his brother actually criticizes presidency. Awards. Mbeki was awarded the Good Government Awards in 1997 by the US-based Corporate Council on Africa. He received the Newsmaker of the Year award from Pretoria News Press Association in 2000 and repeated the honor in 2008. His time under Auspice of Media Research Company monitoring South Africa. Patronages: Thabo Mbeki's Foundation, Thabo Mbeki's African Leadership Institute, an institute of the University of South Africa in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki's Foundation, Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library, Thabo Mbeki School for Public and International Affairs based in UNISA. And that is all for our presidency. Thabo Mbeki, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of our president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. Now, please subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you next time. Whoa, whoa.